Welcome back, everyone, to Somewhere on the Spectrum. This week, we have another amazing episode for you as we continue our journey navigating the world of autism. As an elementary principal, I have learned so many things, right? I have to tell you, I really was in a bubble. And I think if we all step back and think about where we fit on this journey, we might all agree with that. Because what's important to us in the moment tends to be the most important thing to us. And I never even thought, of course, let me back up. I did think about when kids left me and went on to secondary, but my thought process never went beyond secondary schools. And hearing last week from our friends that talked about getting out of school and into the adulthood and how that transition goes. And now this week, talking a little bit more about the real challenges of being an adult with the diagnosis of autism or some kind of neurodiverse diagnosis. It's something that I am so glad I was able to connect with all of these people and bring these stories to you, because the ladies on today's episode are going to give you amazing pieces of information from all different ends of the spectrum to help you as you work through the world of autism. We have a long episode going on today, so I'm not going to take up much time. But again, I want to welcome you back to Somewhere on the Spectrum and sit back and enjoy, because we've got some great information today. Hey there, everyone. Welcome back, as I mentioned, to Somewhere on the Spectrum for another great week of our interviews. As you heard me talk in the introduction, this week we're going to be talking a lot about what happens after schooling. Last week, we really talked about the transition piece. Do we go to college? Do we go off to work? What does that look like? What does it feel like? And of course, we don't have all of the answers because everybody is on a different level on the spectrum. But now we have to start thinking about adulthood. And I don't know about any of y'all, but I know just becoming an adult for a neurotypical thinker was challenging, right? You have to find yourself in the world. You have to find your new friend groups, figure out how your boundaries look with your family, and balance a career along with your family. And it's challenging. And then add on top of that, going through some additional types of thoughts and things that we have to do to support our people that are on the spectrum, it can be quite a challenge. And one that, as you heard me say before, I guess I wouldn't even thought about, because my world was working with little children in elementary school. So we have our guest back this week, Glenda Kroll from Canada, and she is going to be talking to us again with some great information. You heard her last week, and the things she pointed out are just so important, because number one, we never want this to look like this is all going to be fun and games and everybody's going to be having a party. There are real issues going on, and depending upon where you are in the world, depending upon what your role is as a caretaker or a support system, everybody could look a little bit different. But I really appreciated Glenda's perspective last week, because it really opened my eyes for sure about things that need to be addressed, especially because times change all the time. I think that's the one constant about life, is that it's going to change, right? And when you think about the different ages now, for a 5-year-old, when they become a 50-year-old or a 40-year-old, technology, all of the things could look completely different to where who knows how we will address some of these things. But when you think about our baby boomers and where life was for them, as we heard in schooling, and now into their adult and senior years, it's just different. It's just different. And we all have to be aware of that because we're dealing with people and all of us are unique in our own way. But then you add this on top. So Glenda, thank you for coming back and sharing that great perspective last week because it really opened my eyes for sure.
Well, thank you very much for bringing me on again. Like I've said, and my journey has been a long one, and I'm continuously moving forward with my journey with my brothers as they have lived a much longer life than we anticipated. And I'm grateful for that. And I'm glad, from my perspective has always been about giving them as best of a life as I could possibly do. Because in some forms, I guess when I look back and remember some of the things, the challenges they went through, I really felt in a lot of ways they were held back from what they could have done in their lives. So, my challenges is now giving them a good life, and balancing it all together. But yes, life certainly changes from the 20 and 30-year-olds and 40 upwards, because there's so many other things that people just don't do. And my mother didn't do it. It was, a lot of things came onto my plate because she didn't want to face up to some of the realizations. And that's not sitting back, and I'm not trying to put her down. She, I know she loved my brothers and loved all of us in the best way she could. And she dealt with things that most people never did because of, first of all, back then, in the early 50s, when my brothers were born, it was a totally different world than where we are today. So I get it. And but she didn't, I came the younger person with a very different perspective. And that's, the key word here is perspective. But we do have to figure out that when we are looking at things, we have to be real. And even though through the years I challenged my mother, as a matter of fact, we had a lot of hard times together, her and I, because I looked at things very different than how she had. And she did things what she did. And then I came back to a decision at life that since I was only the sister, knowing full well that it was going to be on my plate someday, and I figured that out even as a small child. I don't know why, but it always came to me. I decided at one point, since we were having very big challenges, her and I, and that I would just sit back and not say anything because I had to respect the fact that I was not the parent. And but I did my own little bit of research sort of in the back very quietly, so that when the day would come, I would sort of have an idea of where I would move. And that sort of gave me comfort within myself because I knew it was going to come to pass.
That's an interesting point because I bet that there are people out there watching right now that are in a similar position as you, that you don't have the decision-making capability at this moment, the authority, I guess, to say not capability, but the decision-making authority. But as we evolve as a human race and everything changes and we learn more, then we have these thoughts and these ideas that could possibly be very, very successful, but we're dealing with somebody that maybe isn't open to listening to all of that. And I'm sure that that is a real thing for many people.
Parents, and I'm a parent now, so I sort of looked at things a little differently at one point when I became a parent. But a lot of parents, and I see this very common with parents who have children with special needs, they're a little bit more protective than a regular not a regular parent, you know what as I'm putting it too.
Mhm.
As, but when you have a child with special needs, you have your, you're protecting, you're always worried of the, they fall, where they go, and all of the rest of the things. So what ends up happening a lot of times, and I saw it in my mother for sure, and many other people since I've been putting it out there, and I've had the ability to coach other families to help them move themselves forward, is that they do put their child into a bubble, of that protection bubble.
Mhm.
But they don't realize, and I saw it firsthand while I was growing up, and I saw it even more so as my brothers were getting older, is that protection bubble actually pulled them back.
Mhm.
My brothers didn't have the abilities of doing things that I knew that they were capable of doing, because my mother was scared to let go. And as I said, I'm not coming down on her. She did the best she could in her situation. And, it's really easier sometimes for the outsider, even though I wasn't quite the outsider, right? I was the outsider who was inside.
Mhm.
So, right, not having the parent, and I understand being a parent myself, although I do recognize that children, no matter what level they are in, children need to fall to be able to learn to get up again. If
Mhm.
we stop them from falling, then we are harnessing them from growing up and from developing the skills that we all need at certain levels. And no matter who we are and what level we are, we all have the ability to learn something at our level.
Mhm.
So it's not saying, I'm not expecting them to go out and get a university degree and rock it in there, but where my brother was held back for years of not my mother wanting to work, it was me pushing that finding things and getting him out there. My other brother didn't have the same level, so he went to groups where he would there was a workshop area where they would find programs and they would allow them to do small tasks. And he stayed there for years until there was many changes. And then when there were changes, he was becoming very aggravated by it. And since my brother is not as verbal as he used to be, and that was because he was in a major car accident at one point in my life, which actually brought him back. So where he was more verbal before the accident, after the accident, he wasn't as verbal. It did affect him. But when something is wrong, he has his signs, and I'm very cognizant of those signs. As a matter of fact, we'll talk about it in a minute, what I ended up doing for my brothers that actually gave them more independence than most people believe. But when he is upset about something, he shows signs in his hands. He starts shaking his hands. And that's my first note of saying something's wrong. Mike's nervous.
Mhm.
So when I see that, that's my step in. And when people are working with my brothers, I know there's certain facial things that they do, and those are my key things that something's going on. So you jump in. So first of all, learn what your child, learn their triggers, their
Mhm.
trigger points,
Mhm.
because something in them, before it mounts, there's triggers that happen. And whether they show it on their facial expressions, their hands, their body, something shows before they even hit that real trigger where they're bouncing off walls or whatever the case may be, right?
Mhm.
So I always saw the triggers, how my brothers reacted when the situation wasn't good. If something was bothering them, something was happening, I could see it, and I would step in before it mounted to something else. But when people didn't understand that, even many people that I work with who are in the profession, believe it or not, are not always quite as conscious of this. And it's because of, I think it's just a matter of who I am and what I am very observant. So I always notice all different things. Like, well, I can see my brothers and I do a scan within a few seconds and I can see something's wrong or not. So it's just my eye, but when you can deal with those triggers before they happen and you can settle them down and start talking to them, it changes the environment.
Mhm.
So at a point where my brother was in this program for 40 years and doing well until the time where they removed the person who was the head of that department, that group, that was his connection for most of the entire time.
Mhm.
She went away on maternity leave, and they didn't set it up right. So they allowed for her to move. They brought in a new person, which is a huge change.
Mhm.
People with challenges don't do well with changes. Changes need to be adapted on a slow stance, and you need to prepare them. Like, my brothers might not be as verbal, but they understand everything. And we have to know that how much our loved ones understand what they do. And there's different ways of allowing them to understand. And,
Mhm.
whether it's verbal, physical, doing by pictures, there's all different ways of explaining things out. You just got to find what your loved one, how they relate and work well with that. And you can adjust that. And my brother didn't work well, and they kept changing the person in the group. And finally, when he starts tearing things and it starts to get really bad, and it starts to build, and that's what was happening. And I kept on saying, you keep changing the people, you can't keep making changes. Like, you need to stop, you need to start sitting down and forming a group and allowing him to participate. But nobody wanted to listen to me. Like, after all, who was I? I'm only the sister. And it got to the point where he was ripping chairs and like covers on chairs, and it got very that. And finally, they just didn't want anything to do with him, and they kicked him out of the program after 40 years.
Wow. Wow.
And which was another
Mhm.
huge change. But Tom, sometimes from every bad comes actually good.
This is true. This is true.
So I went back at that point because their life was starting to change. You see, in the midst of all of this, as they were getting into it, my father had already passed away, which was a huge thing of teaching them. My mother didn't understand about, well, I felt when my brother should be at the funeral. My mother didn't want my brother because she felt it was going to be too hard. But
Mhm.
again, that wasn't a great decision, because then it didn't allow him to deal with death and to learn from it. And at any level, we're not talking about death can be taught to a child, right?
Mhm.
So when my mother was starting to show signs of dementia, when things started really happening in the home front, she didn't recognize my brother, was kicking him out of the house. I had to start now ramping everything up. So my change in life started because now, at that time, when, the problem is nobody sees things are going to happen to them.
Mhm.
And we all think we're going to live and be healthy and live till the end of time. But that's not how life works.
Right.
Every single time, even as a child, when I kept on saying to my parents, what happens to the boys when you die? It's all I kept asking. And my mother had this whole idea that they would live in a place where they would, they would be on a bus route, and there'd be a supermarket close by, and they could live on their own, because as she thought that they were quite self-sufficient.
Mhm.
Well, they were self-sufficient to make themselves a piece of bread and put some butter or cheese on it. They were self-sufficient to go to the bathroom, and maybe at times my brother needed a little bit of cleaning up afterwards, but they were self-sufficient to get dressed on their own and to physically put the food in their mouth. Yeah, they were self-sufficient to that. And I'm not saying that that's a terrible thing. That's great. And I'm very fortunate that they were at that level. And because I was around where people were on feeding tubes and all the rest of it. So I get the big picture. But they weren't self-sufficient to live on their own.
Mhm.
And when it started happening, my life became a whirlwind because it all came onto my plate,
So
and
let me
nothing
let me stop you right there for a minute though, Glenda, because you have said so many huge nuggets that I want to circle back just a little bit, because these are things that in some ways we dealt with even in the elementary school realm. But also I've heard so many people say over the months that I've been researching and getting started with this. So I want to back you up to where you said, we protect our children, and I'm guilty too, right? I'm a mama and I have just one. I never anticipated having children, so she's the world to me. And
Yep.
I did put her in a bubble as well. So parents, if you're out there listening, we're all guilty of this. But I remember hearing a parent tell me this one time in a special ed meeting. They were crying. It was right after the diagnosis, and we were trying to get ready to make a plan. And you could definitely tell that they blamed themselves for the disability.
The
And
guilt.
I noticed, yeah, over the years that that becomes kind of a typical pattern.
Yeah.
And I know that we don't know an exact cause at this point of what, brings this on. There are a lot of theories and a lot of different research pieces out there. But I do want parents to hear, I don't want you to blame yourself, because any of us could have children that might need something different. Even my own daughter, she requires a little extra love and support. She's very emotional sometimes, and she was a theater major in college, so you can imagine she's a little dramatic. And she was a people pleaser, very perfectionist kind of person. She took after her mama. So I have to deal with her a little bit different than maybe I would deal with a different student that had been at my school. So I think we all have to remember as parents that, yes, we want to protect our children, but then you said it best. But knowing your child, even as they get into the adult years, and what triggers them, what signs do you start to see? Being observant to know. They start tapping. I had a student that he would always start doing this, and I knew, and I told the teacher, when he does this, you need to be prepared. You need to get help, because it's going to get bad real fast, because we
Yes.
knew that about the child, right? And as parents, that might be a great thing to incorporate so that you can let them experience different things, but notice when this starts to happen, or the tapping or whatever it is, this or maybe the little bit of rocking,
The
that's,
rock. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you want to step in and divert the attention a little bit different, so that you can see how much they can do. So I really like what you said about that, because I think that that is something we don't allow ourselves as parents to, we don't give ourselves permission to be able to do that, because we just want to protect. And I think underlying a lot of times it's because we blame.
But let's put it this way to every parent. And this is holds true because I have two children and they're both, thank God, healthy beings, but they're two different people.
Mm-hmm.
So they both learned very differently. And I, even with my children, had to parent both differently
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
they both reacted to things differently. As
Mm-hmm.
I had to learn with my brothers, again, two different human beings. Where Michael would hold a lot more in, Stephen would explode a lot faster.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so every child, every person reacts in a different way. Now, who we are and who we become is not like any parent. And I know my mother had a lot of guilt that she held in. We knew from my brothers are Fragile X. That's which is a part of autism.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's a genetic disorder. And I know because it wasn't until I started becoming serious with what turned into being my husband. And when things were starting to get serious, I kept asking the question, why are the boys the way they are? I wanted
Mm-hmm.
answers because am I going to have a child who's like my brothers? Because
Mm-hmm.
never mind was there one of them, but I had two of them,
Mm-hmm.
two boys and two girls. And I had a lot of questions. And it wasn't until I started really pushing, and then I went to my doctor and said, I need to understand why of my brothers. And that's when we went in to going for genetic counseling, and I started getting answers. With Fragile X, it can be detected through, when they do DNA testing. And even at the beginning, when I started, DNA testing didn't exist, but through genetic counseling, they could, they actually put a name on it many years ago, and it got a little easier as they got older. And then, of course, I had it before, again, we did it before my mother passed away, because now there were signs of dementia, so I didn't know if it came through on their side as well.
Mhm.
But the thing is yes, we all wish that, we could make our world perfect and beautiful and everything will go well, but it's just part of life,
Mhm.
unfortunately.
Life has
And
challenges, right? There's ups and
yeah,
downs.
but through those challenges, come great things. I would
Mhm.
never be the person I am today if it wasn't for my brothers. I would never have the kindness, the maturity, the compassion, understanding if it weren't for them.
And I do truly believe as well, people are only given what they can handle, right? And there's a
I
reason.
don't know about that one, but okay.
Well, that's just my philosophy,
I
you
know.
can agree or not agree, but I do believe, I'm not a big religious person, but I can say this. I do believe that God gives you as much as you can handle. And if it's challenging times, usually there's some kind of reason, like they're prepared, you're being prepared for something bigger. That's just my philosophy on that. But I think that we do have to remember life is always going to be 50-50, good and bad. And when we are down, the lessons that we learn from that is what will make us into who we are and make us as successful as possible. In these situations, we have to look at what is success going to look like for you, for your family, for your loved one, because nobody has similar lives. I look at my neighbor next door, we're both single women and we're both 52. And that's the only thing we have in common, except for our houses are kind of designed the same because I live in a planned community. But other than that, we have no similarities whatsoever, right?
Yeah.
And that's just the two of us. And so we all know that that's very unique. Now, as you are thinking, and as we're starting to wrap up today's conversation, we know that times have been so different and you all have gone through so many of the changes in life. I think baby boomers for sure have experienced the most change in the world, period, between going from where everybody was as babies, so to speak, into now your senior years and working through that. I think I went through a lot of change, but I'm a Gen Xer and I still have a lot more to go. But I say that to ask you this question. Knowing what you know now, and knowing that your brothers are in a good place now, because we've had that conversation, would you go back and do anything different if you could do so? That could help a family right now as they're working through this journey.
Oh, definitely. I would, first of all, if I was the parent, I would have started the search of figuring out what was going to happen with my child. My brothers, I moved them into a group home because no, they couldn't live by themselves.
Mhm,
And it wasn't fair for them to be there, because then they would have been totally secluded,
mhm,
and that would not have been healthy. And I would have moved them into a group home earlier, and it would have been much better had they moved in when my mother was still alive, because the transition would have been a lot simpler and a lot smoother.
mhm,
I had to deal with death. I had to deal with all the moving parts as she was dying, and not allowing them to see her anymore because it wasn't a good place for them to be. And at the same time, looking for help in the house to get them as I'm looking for a group home. The problem is such a long waiting list for group homes. So you need to start early. The
mhm,
whole idea is, start building what's going to be tomorrow. Start putting money away because they're going to need it when you're not around. Start putting some things in place, because had I had all some of this stuff already done, I had so much put onto my plate at the time when my children were young. I'm running my business. Then I'm dealing with a mother who's dementia and brothers at the same time. My world was chaotic.
Mhm.
And yes, I managed it. And yes, I had wonderful miracles that came on to me. And I'm a seeker. I find things and all the rest of it. But it wasn't fair for me as a sibling to have this all thrown onto my back. If, as the parent, and, I did it because I do have love and I don't want any harm to come to my brothers. And that's why I do what I do. But the world would have been a lot easier to transition, never mind just me, but most importantly, them, to move into a group home where there's going to be support all the time. There's people around, there's activities going on, there's programmings that you can adapt into. It created a much incredible world for them. They are happy where they are. There is always somebody around. So if something is wrong, doesn't mean I'm out of the picture. Every week I see my brothers, or if I don't, at least I speak to them. And during COVID, I bought them an iPad, each an iPad, so that they could have physically see me, so
Mhm.
that there's conversation. And it's not that if Michael won't talk, at least he sees Glenda's face, he's happy.
Mhm.
So there's so many different ways of doing it, but start it early, even start looking what is around you. Start to look at what is there in your community. The Canada has a lot of great things. I don't know what the US has, but there is a lot out there, but it's like a maze. So you got to start early. You got to start looking out there. And, if there's anyone watching, even from Canada now, that wants extra, I'm open. That's what part of what it, for me is helping others. So don't close your doors, open them, because what you're going to do for your child is you're going to prepare them for a much happier life moving forward. And you know what? The most important thing in my life that gives me the greatest amount of joy is when I see my brothers smile.
Mhm. I love
You know,
that.
that's
Yeah.
all it takes.
And that's a perfect way to end that, because that's a great piece of advice. And again, it's giving ourselves that permission. But I love the fact that you have offered for people to reach out to you. And we are going to be in episode number 7, we're going to be talking a whole lot more about resources that are available to families, and ways to get some support no matter what age level. So I think that that's going to be a great time to be able to talk about some of those, no matter where you are, right, in the
Yeah.
world. Well, Glenda, I appreciate you coming back on again this week, because again, just so much for us to know and think about, but such great advice and baby steps for us all to start moving forward. And that's what it's all about, because I always told my teachers before, you can't start running on Monday and run a marathon on Friday. It just
No,
doesn't work like that. And I think that that's true in life as well. When you're trying to really make sure that you're building that life that everybody is going to do their very best in, that environment that allows everybody to thrive to the best of their ability, you have to do it one step at a time. And thank
life
you.
is one step at a time.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And when we come back, we'll have another amazing interview as we continue to talk about navigating the world of autism. Hey there, everyone. As I promised, we have another amazing guest for you to hear from today. And I want to welcome for the first time to the show, Julie Lavia. Hey, Julie.
Hi,
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I know you're in Canada, and I'm sure the weather is a little different than it is here. It's quite humid, and we're getting ready for some storms.
Oh, today it's actually very gloomy, raining on and off, and drizzly. So, I was hoping for some nice natural light, but this is the best it can do. So, what can you?
Well, you
What
look
can you?
great. You look
Thank
great.
you.
And thank you for joining us, because I know that the audience is really gonna love the conversation that we have today. And here's why. I met you and immediately I was drawn to you. And once we got connected and I got to know you more, I'm so just impressed and empowered by the work that you're doing, because so many people want to give reasons why they can't go do something in life. And you are right there, a go-getter, and you don't let anything get in your way. And I just love that about you.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. So Julie, you are on the team. You came to me through a mutual connection we have on social media. And as I mentioned, being the first time on the show, kind of give us some context to how you got here today. Being an individual somewhere along the spectrum, maybe unofficially, officially, your journey's been a little bit different. So tell us a little bit about you.
Sure, Sherry. Hi, everybody. My name is Julie Lavia. I'm a visibility strategist, digital marketer, and also a female empowerment advocate. So I want to help women boost visibility in their business by showing up for themselves, showing up as their authentic selves, and just giving them a platform so they could create that impact. So I reached out to you because, like you said, we were in the same mutual networking group, and you mentioned that you were gonna, you wanted to really shine the spotlight on neurodivergency and especially autism. So that really piqued my interest because I've been wanting to find a platform and I've been wanting to find a way to kind of just share my story on a show, even though I tried doing it in a book format, but like things kind of went south and I wasn't able to really get my story across. Yes, I want to definitely be part of this, and because there are a lot of people out there who are like me who either self-diagnosed, misdiagnosed, or undiagnosed. So it's I think it's definitely a good way to wake people up that, like, if you do have a kid with autism or just neurodivergent in general, that you need to kind of focus on that. You kind of not to don't let it sweep under the rug. Make sure that you're educated and equipped. But the problem is, like, back in the 80s, where when I was born there, and even in the 90s, it was still very taboo and a lot of people didn't have a lot of information about autism. So, and if you even had the information about autism, you had to be like banging your head against the wall, or you had to be like really like out of it to be considered like autism or autistic. But then little did we know that later on they had so many different spectrums of autism. So this basically now, like, because it was something that my parents kind of speculated about me since I was growing up, but because, like I just told you, they didn't have different spectrums of autism. Like, you had to be very severe. And then so then that's why, like, due to this, like, not being able to have an official diagnosis, I had a hard time just basically going through school because it affects your social skills. You're classified as different, and people and children are very ignorant at that time because once you're different, you're considered like untouchable or like unfriendly. And I was very shy and very quiet, like, in school, and very introverted, and had a hard time making social relationships, or just more or less kind of just stuck to like whoever I thought gravitated more with me. So people didn't like that. And so when I changed schools in the third grade, it was like a whole completely different world, and these kids didn't really give me a chance to kind of get to know who I am. And it's like, you always have like that one bully or one class clown that tries to control everybody and try to change their mindset, and, oh, don't hang out with her, don't play with her, you're not part of this club. So yeah, I kind of went through that stage where you walk in every day and you don't know what's going to happen, but you definitely know for sure that your entire class is going to be turned against you because they have to follow whatever the bully or the class clown says, right? If that person doesn't like you, or then they have that, they tend to manipulate people into doing that, like I said. So yeah, it was very hard, just going to school every day and just not having friends, a lot of friends, or just being accepted. And this continued on until from third grade until sixth grade. It wasn't the same bully, but it was different kids all the time. That was just, I think maybe I got the worst of it in third grade and the worst of it in sixth grade. You know what I mean? It was just not being able to be accepted and not being able to just be who I really am, and also not having a voice too, because I was quiet and shy. And if these people were bothering me, I would go to my mom, and my mom would be the one to handle the situation, like being in mama bear protective mode. So that didn't, so I had to learn to like stick up for myself and have a voice, but I didn't learn until way much later, you know what I mean? So she had to more or less come and talk to the principal, or even talk to the kid itself, to like tell them, hey, leave her alone, that type of thing. So yeah, just around that time, I think it was just like the worst of it, just trying to, be myself and trying to exist in a world where everybody is supposedly molded the same. And just yeah, it wasn't easy. So yeah, that's
Well,
pretty much a nutshell. Yeah.
and I love that you feel empowered to share that, because you're right. Being a former principal, and I didn't go into the principalship until 2006, so I was a little bit farther along timeline wise, but even then it was still very taboo, and I had to work very hard going into the campus that I did to get everybody to be inclusive, so to speak, right? To get everybody to accept each other and not fight with each other or tease each other. And that was in elementary school. And it's interesting, some of the things that you said about your journey, I've heard others within our series talk about the same thing. Learning how to advocate for yourself, learning how to, get support and get help when times are hard, hearing from those that are on the spectrum, how the same treatments happen to them. And Julie, some of them are much younger than you. One of our young men, he's still in high school, and one of our young ladies, she's just in college. So I think it's a big message to put out, how all of us teach our children, educators, parents, whether you're on the spectrum, you're not on the spectrum, whether you're tall, whether you're short, whether you're wide, whether you're thin, it doesn't matter, but we all have to be accepting, learn how to accept each other for our unique qualities. Because if we don't start teaching that, that's when we continually see children suffer, and even adults suffer. We even have adult bullies, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree. So I just love that that even you as a principal, that you could even you're seeing these things, and you come in with like a fresh pair of eyes and with an open set of eyes, that we have to be more inclusive. And I love that you said going back into like teaching parents and teaching. I think schools need to kind of just like, because inclusivity, like especially with people with special needs, wasn't so big back then. And there was also a special ed classroom in my school, but because you could, the thing with autism, you could be easily misdiagnosed, because there are people, especially autistic people who have Asperger's syndrome, and that's usually where their social game is failing, but then they're very, very smart, you know what I mean? But little did they know that, like, even though I was suffering socially, it kind of took an impact also in my learning, because my learning took a suffer, because I didn't have like the right people in school to help me. And then also, like, I kind of maybe had a little bit of a delay, but then it was just because I didn't come off as a person autistic. And that's another thing I'd love to talk about too. I don't know if you have other people who have gone through this in your series, but there's also the masking effect, and which is basically where we sometimes know that we have this special needs, or we have this we home we're like completely ourselves, but then when we go out in the world, out in schools, that we know how to kind of hide it and adapt and whatnot. So that was something that I didn't even realize, that it's actually a thing, like masking. Like, I would go to school and I would have to, like, hide those urges, those stimming urges, because I would, like, often probably just want to shift in my seat, or just want to laugh out loud at something like that went on in my head. And you know what I mean? So
Oh, that's such a good
that
point.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that's such a good point, because,
I don't know if it's ever like happened.
and now that you've mentioned it, here's the thing, stepping back out of the principalship now and just reflecting on all of my days and all of the encounters I've had, I remember saying a lot of times to teachers and to parents, maybe not necessarily children because they were younger, but kids learn how to cover up a disability real quick. And they take that lead, I think, a lot of times from us as the adults. So if the teacher thinks, no, there's nothing wrong with you, well, then they're just gonna act like there's nothing wrong with me and just keep, masking, so to speak. And even with parents, and I think it's all because of that fear, maybe, that there's something different. I'm not sure what's different. I don't know where to get started with help, because every parent that I've spoken to in my journey in education and within this series has said, when I look back at it now, I knew there was something there, but I just didn't know what to do next.
Yeah, and I think that's the same thing with my parents. Like my father would have kind of been like, there's something wrong or whatever. And my mom did know, but I will say her response most of the time was like, okay, she'll grow out of it. You know what I mean? She will just kind of just sweep it under the rug. But then I can't blame her for being kind of ignorant, because especially when they come from like a certain background and they don't really like, they don't take these types of things seriously, like especially. And then I was telling you, like the 80s and the 90s, like it was still very taboo, and there wasn't a lot of help around like autism, or a lot of resources as it is now. Like more people are being, bringing more awareness to this. And so yeah, so like I love that you said that, like some parents are saying like, yeah, if I could go back in time and I would probably, I know that something was there, but I didn't know how to act on it or how to intervene. And I know I had this conversation with my mother, and she did say, she did admit that, yeah, if that's one thing I did wrong as a parent, that I could have been more proactive and try to do something about it, right? So instead of just saying, well, let her grow out of it, which I did grow out of it. I did come out a long way. There's still little instances of it being there. It's not as bad as before, but it's still it's the part of my life that I had to kind of hide for a long time until very recently. So
Yeah,
yeah.
kudos to you for sure, because that's a tough journey. And unfortunately for your mom, she did feel, and I think a lot of parents feel, I did this wrong. I always try to remind parents when I would have those conversations, we do our best until we know better. And then when we know
Yeah.
better, we can do better. And so we're in a place, I think, especially in 2024, that I'm hoping this will even help with this crusade. But let's not blame anymore. Let's not point fingers anymore. Let's not feel the guilt and shame of it, but bring it to light and learn how to accommodate ourselves so that everyone can feel free to be their wonderful, unique self in the world,
I definitely agree. So I'm gonna fast forward. So back in high school, when I started high school, because it's different in Montreal, we don't have like middle school or junior high, that type of thing. Once you finish elementary, then you go right into high school for 5 years. So so then basically then, like I think I was so traumatized by like a lot of the hurt and a lot of the shame and whatever that was going around me, being like classified as different, that I just kind of shut down and was like a turtle back in like high school, because I just wanted the attention to not be around on me, because you feel like, you're a bully magnet, and people are just gonna, they could smell like, oh, they could smell the rat in the room or the elephant in the room, and they're ready to like poke the bear and poke the elephant. So I just wanted to just stay small and stay, alone. And I mean, I still had a hard time, and I think socially I did get a little bit better, but it was still not easy. Like I just felt like I was living in like this pond with a whole bunch of different fish of all kinds, a snapper, a jackfish, whatever, and I'm just like this little fish, and I just want to be by myself in the corner, but I'm like got piranhas around me trying to like eat at me. And it's like, I know it's a weird analogy, but that's how I felt in this kind of like world. And that's what made me now be a lot more introverted and just want to spend time being myself, but being authentically myself as well. So I would say that I did kind of struggle socially, and I kind of pushed the autism thing behind me. I repressed everything that happened with the bullying. But then I was saying that the last like 5 years or less, this is when I really started wanting to share my story about my autism, because I think I went to school and then this teacher was like, I could see that you're on the spectrum, and I think you need to learn to embrace that you have autism, and use it to your advantage. So that was really like an eye opener for me, that yeah, I shouldn't be ashamed of this. And there were people now that were coming out and saying, I have autism, and if you don't know what it is, and this is my superpower. So like it took me a couple of years to really like, be comfortable talking about it. So now I come on these shows, I come like, I use PR marketing and wherever I can to really speak about the autism. So it's still a long journey, but at least it's a start.
Well, I mean, I'm just so proud of you. I am. And it's so good to hear that even with all of the adversity from your past, that you have such a positive attitude about it and you've been able to work through that. And I know that's because you've gotten the right supports and you have the right mindset. And I know that if anybody watching this ever wanted to talk with you, I know that you would be willing to do that and just talk about that journey, because sometimes it's knowing that somebody out there is similar to you and that you can have a conversation with them for sure.
Yeah, that was another thing too, because I was starting to feel that nobody understood me. You know what I mean? Like I just, even though I was out there, I've learned to mask my behavior or my disability for so long, and it just felt nice to just like uncover that mask and find like a group of people or find a community where like I felt like I was not alone. Like there's other people out there who have Asperger's. There's other people out there that have mild to moderate autism or even high autism. So it just and that just and now more people in the Facebook communities are talking about neurodivergency and making it known that it's okay. So like it just makes me feel a lot better to just take off the mask for once and say, yeah, this I have it too, and I'm ready to talk about it and what can we do to make it better. So even though now I own a business, and I just think that you shouldn't let your yeah, excuse me, your disability define you. And like I find like, a lot of people look at people with disabilities and neurodivergency and they look at them as like they're incapable of doing certain things and they're dumb and they're slow. But like we have the superpower. Sometimes I have an exceptional memory, like probably a way better memory than most average people have. So I can remember so many things, and I can make that to use. And I'm very good at business and scheduling and just getting all my stuff together. So don't count us out. You know what I mean? Like we have some superpowers that could like really impress you. So
Absolutely. So let's talk about your business, because it's one thing to be thriving in the world, right? And to be able to be independent and doing things that the majority of adults in the world are doing, right? Not just here in the United States, but all over the world. But to be a successful entrepreneur is already challenging. I can attest to that because I just moved into the world of business and starting my own business, and there are ups and downs, and every day there's something that I want to sit down and cry about. And I had a very successful career going into this and all of the things, but look at you taking that step, starting this business, and you're doing amazing things. I come into your networking groups and to your sessions that you hold with women and the way you empower everyone. And I know I've said that word a few times, but it really truly is. You're engaging people into work that is purposeful and intentional for them. And as women, we leave out feeling like, wow, yeah, we can go do this. We're capable of more than what we really think.
yeah, so that's why I was all about being a female empowerment advocate as well, because like you said, I'm building a community to empower women. So I just don't want us to feel alone. And I know in this business, when I started, just being someone introverted, a first-time entrepreneur, and kind of just, feeling your way around to see what works for you. And I just felt like there wasn't a lot of networking and support around how to help people. Everybody was just busy about making that sale and just giving you that fake relationship. And I just didn't like that. So I was like, I want to do something different. And I always, like I said, my story, having been bullied and then having to, live a life of trying to be normal, conforming to society, and then still masking my like disability. So I felt like I had a lot to share. And then also not having a voice, speaking up for myself, saying, no, I'm not going to accept this. And I didn't talk about the time where I almost like had a heart attack because I was working a job that was like very high in demand, and I had a very high in demand what's the word, manager, and like it just stressed me out and took a toll on me. And then like I ended up with heart issues, you know what I mean? Heart problems, high blood pressure, that type of thing. So that also I stemmed from not standing up for myself and having a voice and saying, no, I'm not going to push myself like that ever again, and use my voice when I feel it's necessary, you know what I mean? So um that's why I was very strong about like, you know, wanting to like help females like empower themselves, because I wanted to feel empowered, and maybe, you know, using their energy is going to help me like empower myself and uplift myself too. So that's why I was very strong about providing a platform. So I have a show that I'm trying to launch as well called Her Roadmap to Resiliency, where I'm, you know, letting other women be seen and heard on my platform, so they could tell their story and like, you know, help other women out there as well. So I'm paying it forward too. So that's
I know,
so.
it's amazing. I'm just so excited that you are in my world. And I am sure that you are very proud of yourself. And I bet your parents are very proud of you as well.
Mhm. They are, yeah. I can't wait for my books to come out as well. So I'm going to be sharing my story in a co-authored series, and like I'm excited. Like I'm hoping that I'm finally going to be able to have that platform to be where more people are going to be able to hear what I went through. So
Yeah, that is just so amazing. And that's what this is all about, is to be able to bring, some real information out to people so that we know that this is a very serious journey that people have to go on, but also to highlight when great things are happening, when we're able to find the right system for, our loved one or ourselves, if we can't live independently and live a life such as yours, but also to celebrate when we are able to do that and overcome all of the things from the past. I said in my most recent book that's coming out, our past does make us who we are, but it doesn't determine our future. We
no,
can overcome all of that trauma, and we can get to a place where we're living that life that we love. And you're doing just that, along with everything else that goes on within you and your own unique self. So that's amazing.
thank you so much. And I also just wanted to add, like a lot of us, well, people with autism, like we have a hard time with eye contact, and we also hate showing up on camera. And this already is a really big deal for me, because when I was a kid, like my picture taken all the time, because I just didn't like eye contact, and I just didn't like having my photo taken. I just didn't feel comfortable in my body. Like I just did. I'm sure other people with autism might relate to that too. Like we just feel so awkward and so uncomfortable for some reason. But this was already a big step, like just coming on here and doing these interviews, these virtual interviews, and showing up on camera and just, you know, saying I'll do the damn thing, and they forget, you know, forget about the nerves and forget about the uncomfortableness, but you want to get your message out there, right? So that's I just want to leave that message, like, you know, what's the word? Get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because you're right. And that's something I've noticed in you. So just being very observant, from my, background and things, you get better every single week when I see you on camera. And that's amazing as well, because that is a real thing. Eye contact, the social graces, and everybody's going to be a little different, right? That's why there's a spectrum, but those are more typical kinds of indicators of being, on the spectrum. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you would say out to the audience about this journey, that if they could take just one takeaway from today? I mean, they have a whole handful, a whole suitcase probably of things, but what would be one thing that maybe we haven't talked about that you want to make sure that they hear?
um that's a good question. I would say um no, I'm trying to think here.
I
Okay,
know I'm putting
so
you on the spot.
that's
Yeah.
okay. I guess it's about learning to forgive yourself, not to be too hard on yourself, and like don't like I guess I spoke about it just now. Like don't let your disability define you. Like if you want to open a business, if you want to, reach for the stars, then I don't see anything wrong with that. I think you could always get help. There's always people out there nowadays. There's a lot of coaches out there that work with specifically neurodivergent clients. So even if like you don't know where to start, you could always seek one of those, and then they could help you, guide you through, and get you into where you want to be. And I'm also like you, like I know you mentioned that you have ADHD, and I have autism, and I'm sure sometimes we get into challenges where we have a hard time, being so focused and organized. And so like I think like we just have to find strategies and ways to not let that get in our way, and like work with it, that type of thing. So I may not be perfect like coming on camera and speaking, but at least I'm doing it. I'm trying to get better at it. And we're not perfect. And so yeah, just don't worry about coming in perfect. Just you're going to make mistakes, you're going to fall a few times, but you will get to where you want to be. So, and don't let that disability define you.
That is a perfect ending to our conversation today. And just remember this, nobody's perfect. That doesn't even exist. And if you're chasing that all the time, you'll be chasing yourself like a dog chasing its tail, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Julie, it has been such an amazing talk today. And I know that, as I mentioned, you've given out so much information to the audience. I know they can reach out to you. You're on social media, Julie Lavia. But is there a better way if they really wanted to sit down and really, well, virtually or in person, have a conversation with you?
Yeah, so you can reach me on Instagram at Julie Lavia Coaching. And you could also find my Facebook group, She Means Impact Networking and Collaboration for Female Entrepreneurs. I know it's a long name, but I think you'll be able to find it on my Facebook profile. And if you have any stories to tell as well, DM me, because I'm always looking for interviewing women who've gone through their own adversity and their challenges, and how they'll be able to use that roadmap into resiliency. Yeah, so that's basically, I'd love for anybody to come and connect with me. And I'll definitely have that conversation of autism with you. I'm open to it. So yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. What an amazing time. We're filming on a Friday, and it just ended my week on the best possible note. So thank you, Julie. And thank you everyone for tuning in to our time together. And hopefully you took away just a little something that can help you as you navigate the world of autism.
Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, everybody.
Wasn't I correct? Another amazing episode. So much information. I highly recommend that if you need to, go back and rewatch this a few times or take notes the next time, because Julie and Glenda gave us so many nuggets of information that I know will help you on your journey. Now, next week, when we come back, we're going to go into our final stage of life. We're going to be talking about what happens when we get into those senior citizen years, and what happens when our primary caretakers, mostly our parents, pass on, and who gets to be responsible, who needs to be responsible, or what happens for those that need a little more supervision, a little more care as we navigate through the world of autism. I am excited to bring next week's episode to you. Again, I hope you're enjoying and learning a little something that can help you on your journey. And until next time, have an amazing week. And I'll see you next week right here on Somewhere on the Spectrum.